How's everybody doing? Oh, there we go. All right. So I work for Optimism, and Optimism is a layer 2 blockchain. If you have no idea what that means, that is what this talk is about. And this talk will have two parts. I'm going to present very briefly what rollups are, and then I'll talk about funding public goods, which is Optimism's mission, and we'll see what that is. All right, so what are rollups? And the goal of rollups is that it's a way to scale existing blockchains beyond their current capabilities. In particular, Optimism is a rollup for the Ethereum blockchain. So, start with basics. What's a blockchain? A blockchain is a network of nodes, all these computers talking to one another, and they're trying to come to consensus, so to agreement on something. And in the case of blockchain, what they try to agree on typically is a bunch of transactions and the result of these transactions. Consensus, just getting a bunch of computers to agree, is a very old computer science problem. We've solved this decades ago, so we know how to do it. What's new with blockchain is that we want decentralized consensus. And so what does decentralized mean, really? It means that nobody really controls it, and nobody can shut it down. And so a few key properties to achieve that is that it should be permissionless, so everybody can join the blockchain and can verify what's going on the blockchain. If you have permissionlessness, that causes a problem because, sure, me and my friends, we're on the blockchain, we're validating the network, but maybe some rich guy comes and he has 10, 100, 1,000 computers, and then he comes in and takes over the blockchain. So you have to prevent these big actors from taking over the blockchain, and that's a problem called a Sybil resistance, because Sybils are multiple actors that logically belong to the same group or individual. And so some famous solutions to that are proof of work, where you have to make it expensive to validate the blockchain by basically solving a computational problem, and that's where all the electricity consumption from Bitcoin, for instance, and Ethereum comes from. Or the new system, proof of stake, which is about, instead of just burning electricity and solving this useless problem, what if we just put some money down as a deposit, and then your capacity to validate will be proportional to that deposit. And so the assumption there is that nobody's rich enough that they can take over half the network because they don't have enough money to put down. So that's the other property. And then finally, it has to be sufficiently distributed. So you can have Sybil resistance, but if you don't have enough validators, that's meaningless. And finally, the ethos is like, don't trust, validate. So it should be possible for you, an individual, to verify that the blockchain is operating correctly. So Ethereum is very decentralized. There are a lot of validators. It is not very scalable, which is why it's so expensive to use, right? When I wrote those slides, it was like $1 for a transfer, $5 for like exchanging 2 tokens. Imagine each time you go to your baker, you pay $1 for a transaction. That's not very good, right? And it's been much more expensive in the past. Right now, prices are a little bit low, but it's been much more expensive than this. And the question is, why is it so expensive? And it's expensive because the scalability, the throughput, the amount of transactions that you can handle on Ethereum is limited. And there are a lot of people that want to transact on Ethereum. And why don't we increase this throughput? Why don't we process more transactions? It's actually possible with the hardware we have to do that. But the goal is to preserve decentralization. So the Ethereum Foundation and generally like people who decide what goes on in Ethereum, they are very philosophically aligned with the idea that everybody should be able to verify the blockchain. And so today you can verify Ethereum on your laptop at home. I think the only thing you need really is like a 1 terabyte SSD. This is the thing you might not have, but it's 100 euros. You buy it and then you can validate at home. You can try it if you're a little bit technical. It's a fun thing to try to do and see that actually it works. So, okay, how do we make the blockchain scale? there's this famous thing called the scalability trilemma. And so there are three properties: scalability, security, and decentralization. And if you use like simple technologies, the result is that you can only have two of those. So scalability means the blockchain can compute more than a single machine. And in this case, we use a laptop as a reference. Security means that it's about the number of nodes in the network that have to collude together to make the blockchain unsecure. You know, like in proof of work, famously, if more than half the nodes work together, they can do whatever they want with the blockchain. They can double spend. They can violate the rules. And centralization is how hard is it for you to validate the blockchain, to become a node. So there's like two levels. One is validate, so just look at the blockchain and see that the nodes are doing a good work. And then the next level is become a node yourself, and so actually have a say in what is included in the blockchain or not. And so you see, this figure is from a blog post by Vitalik, which is like one of the biggest creator of Ethereum. And it shows like the three things and then different kind of trade-offs you can make. And so you see that ETH and Ethereum and Bitcoin, they are like decentralized, secure, but they're not very scalable. So, okay, we come to rollups. How do rollups solve this problem? So rollups are a separate blockchain. And so on this chart here, you have like the Ethereum blockchain here with all its nodes. And you have the users, when they want to use Ethereum, they send transaction directly to a node on Ethereum. So it's a L1 user. As you can see, there's a top hat and a monocle because he's rich and he can afford to use Ethereum. The L2 blockchain is much more centralized. Here, I've represented a single machine, a sequencer. In practice, there can be multiple. And so as an L2 user, you submit your transaction to the sequencer. The sequencer, you know, I've used a different picture. It's a big machine, right? Not one you could run at home. It's a big server. So it can process a lot of transactions. It processes them, and then it posts them, the transactions, to Ethereum. Ethereum does not execute this transaction, it just stores them. Then the sequencer also posts the result of the transactions to Ethereum. Not the whole memory of the blockchain, just something we call a hash or a Merkle root. And basically, if you don't know what it is, it's just a summary of the result that you cannot falsify. So it does this. And where does the security come from, right? Because currently it just posts a transaction, it posts a result, and it says, that's the result, trust me. So the next step, of course, is to verify these. And the verification is done by independent verifiers. And so what the verifiers do is that they download this transaction, these layer 2 transactions that are on Ethereum. They re-execute it, so they redo the work of the sequencer. They recompute the result, and then they compare to the result that the sequencer gave. If the result is the same, this is good. It means that the sequencer was honest and everything is as it should be. If the result is different, it means that the sequencer tried to cheat, or maybe there is a bug in the sequencer. If that's the case, these verifiers have the opportunity to do something called a fault proof, which is a process through which they will prove that the sequencer was lying or incorrect at least. And so there's two kind of ways to prove that the sequencer is lying, and these correspond to two major kinds of rollups. So there's, actually it's this slide. The optimistic rollups, okay, I got mixed up a little bit. So fault proof is specific to optimistic rollups. So there are two ways to prove that the thing is incorrect. And for optimistic rollups, they use verifiers, and then they engage in this process of fault proof. And yeah, fault proofs are quite technical, but it's actually like my subject of expertise. So if you have any question about it, you can come ask me. And if you're interested, I've made a much longer talk that goes into the details of fault proofs. And you can find here at tinyurl.com/rollups-vid. But today we won't be covering the fault proof process, just know that's a process that makes it possible for verifiers to prove that the sequencer result is incorrect and do so efficiently. So the other way to do a rollup is something called a zero knowledge rollup. And zero knowledge rollup is a very, zero knowledge in general is a very interesting cryptographic technique that lets you prove a statement without revealing some parts of this statement. And so in this case, and after me, Henri from Starkware is going to talk about their own technology of ZK rollup, so look forward to that. In this case, the proof will be of the computation carried by the sequencer. So just as before, you have this sequencer, it executes the transaction, computes a result, but this time it will do something more, which is that it will also generate a proof of the execution that it just did. And it will submit to Ethereum also the proof. And this proof will be verified in Ethereum. And a very important property of these proofs is that they can be verified in much less time, not only than it takes to generate the proof, but even in less time than it would have taken to do the whole computation in the first place. So this is pretty magical mathematics, if you ask me. So one problem with ZK rollups is that generating proof is really expensive. And I put this figure of 10,000 here that I heard somewhere. You know, I don't 100% stand, you know, I don't know exactly, but that's what I heard. So, you know, we have optimistic rollups, ZK rollups. What are the trade-offs? You know, it's not like one is better than the other. But optimistic rollup rely on the assumption that there's at least one verifier that is honest. So we have all these verifiers redoing the work of the sequencer. There needs to be at least one that, if the sequencer is lying, will do the fault proof and will show that that is the case. So these verifiers need to exist. That is like the assumptions there. And because of how technology work, you know, if you have money on Optimism and you want to withdraw this money to Ethereum, you need to wait for 7 days before you're able to do that. And the reason you need to wait for this period is that you need to allow the time for verifiers to verify the work of the sequencer. There are, of course, ways to circumvent this via bridges that let you instantly withdraw money. And basically what these bridges do is that they verify independently, and if they see that things are okay, they say, well, I've checked, it's good, so withdraw your money, but pay me a fee for the risk that I'm taking. For ZK rollups, the problem is that the overhead of generating proofs is very high, which impedes the scalability a little bit, but there are also techniques like fractal scaling that can be used to circumvent that somewhat. And that was on rollups. Again, I have this longer talk if you want more details, and you know I'll be around today, at least this morning, so feel free to ask me any questions that you may have. Okay, so on to the second part of the talk, which I'll try to be fast, not to take too much time. So Optimism is an optimistic rollup, so that was the technology part. What are you actually trying to achieve with that? You know, scaling the blockchain is good, but one thing that Optimism tries to do is to enable funding for public goods. What are public goods? They are commodity or services available to all for free, almost for free. And the classical definition is that these are goods that are non-excludable, so you can't really stop people from using them, either because it's like something like air, you can't just, you know, prevent someone to breathe if you want to, or because society has like decided that we have a right to access the thing, like maybe education or something like that. These things, there's no incentive to really finance them. So like air quality, you can't really like put an incentive on that. And so often public goods are funded through taxes. So if you put example like air quality, the climate is something that, you know, everybody benefits from a very clean climate, but there's not really an incentive for a company to clean up the climate. You won't make money that way. In Belgium, you don't pay for highways except through taxes. You know, the ocean, education, maybe society says you have a right to education. And then the one that's going to interest us, at first for Optimism is that it's open source. So, technological public goods in general. The economy is increasingly fueled by technology. And, all the big companies, they use a lot of open source projects. And all that is built on a bunch of open source projects that are, that have been written by people that are not really paid and do this, for love, or they're relatively underpaid compared to the impact they're having. So I love this comic from XKCD that says, like, the whole tech infrastructure of the world relies by this project by a random person in Nebraska, and there are really many such projects you wouldn't believe that are just maintained by one dude in his kitchen, whatever. And these people are not being fairly compensated for the value that they bring. And so, if they're not being fairly compensated, what happens is that you have less of these impactful projects, and it leads to less innovation, and that's a market failure. Like, what Optimism believes is that if we reward people that are having an impact, that are building things that are important, it will encourage other people to also build these things because they know they will be rewarded. And so not just, the cheeky formulation is, don't waste your brain working on ad technology when you could be something that's actually useful. And so governments haven't really been keeping up yet. It's not like government have been funding open source. And so this needs a different solution. So our solution to this is something called retroactive public good funding. And the idea is that instead of doing a grant, where you just, say, well, I want to fund this, and then people apply, and they say, yeah, we promise we're going to fund this. Instead, you say, well, we're going to pick people who already done it, and then reward them, because it's very easy. Either it works or it doesn't. So it's much, much easier to evaluate. And, the sort of philosophical catchphrase here is impact equal profit. If you did something and was impactful, you deserve to be rewarded with money. So, there's this small excerpt from the vision, and basically, I'm gonna read the selected part. But, the citizens united by a mutually beneficial pact to adhere to axiom of impact equal profit, the principle that positive impact to the collective should be rewarded by profit to the individual. So that's really the key idea. Well, I'll just explain this. Maybe the interesting things are here at the bottom. If you repeatedly fund people, if you repeatedly reward people that have had an impact, people will start to expect this, and so they will start to do these risky projects or these like innovative projects because they expect to be rewarded. And maybe they expect it so much that also investors expect the reward, and so they will start investing in people that build new technology because they expect that they will be rewarded by the reward. And the great thing about it is that it's positive sum. We don't only do this because it's the right thing to do. That's part of it, but not only. So for us, the goal is to start with blockchain and Ethereum public goods, so like open source project in that space that will enable the blockchain to grow, our own ecosystem to grow. And this is not unlike a company that invests its profit into growth, because all this money, where it comes from, by the way, I should say, is from the profits that we make by operating a blockchain. When you run the sequencer, you pay a fee, and this fee, it goes into retroactive public good funding. And yeah, it's kind of nice because people are trying to emulate us. So like these are NFT projects. You see there, I won't say anything about the art, but like these. And basically what they do is that when you buy these NFTs or when you resell them, they have pledged to give part of their profit to public goods also. And so it's great that people are, sort of getting in on that movement. And that's it, right on time.